Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to, once again, Red Hot Talk episode 52. Today we are going to talk a little bit about Sony. We have spent the last few weeks talking about various different brands. If you've missed them, you can always go back to our playlist or replay all of these videos that we talked about. Panasonic, we talked about Olympus/OM system, we talked about Canon last week, we talked about Fujifilm. So this week we're going to talk about Sony, and it's a funny thing about Sony. So we have quite a few things to say, but I have to clarify a few things first. I personally don't have a lot of experience with Sony cameras. I do use a couple of them, I try a couple of them, but I think Rod can fill in a lot of gaps before. However, there's another thing that I would like to add is that for those who may not understand or know about Sony's history, is that they had acquired Minolta. And I don't know whether you guys are old enough to remember Minolta back in the old film days. Or actually, they did do a couple of digital SLR, right, Rod? Minolta?
Oh,
I think they briefly did something Dynamic 7D, something like that. Yeah,
that's a very good point. 5D and a 7D.
Yeah,
that's
they did
a very good point. Yeah.
They did two digital SLR before they got acquired. So they, in fact, the reason I brought that out is because the early days of Sony DSLRs, especially the Alpha mounts, and they were literally Minolta mounts. So you can use old Minolta SLR lenses on those cameras. Quite a few of those early Sony lenses were actually rebranded Minolta lenses. So yeah, that's something I could talk about because I have a couple of Minolta cameras before. So yeah. I think all in all, we can have some fun talking about a little bit of history about Sony. Reason I think, and also Rod think, or maybe you guys think about the rise of Sony, how it became such a big thing in the photographic industry, because previously they weren't really known especially in the pro market. They're more like point and shoot. They had a little bit of camcorders on the side, which is quite popular, the camcorders, but that really was it. So you guys, I would like to hear from you as well if you want to participate, and if you already use Sony cameras or you had experience with Sony cameras, I would like to hear from you. What's your favorite Sony cameras so far? We don't mind if you talk about a really old point and shoot or something. All we want to know is that whether they've used any Sony cameras before. So let's go to Rod. So you have used a lot of Alpha series cameras, the A6000 series. You use the A7 series. Have you tried the A9 series as well, the top end ones?
I've used the A9, but not the 2 or the 3, because that's
Right.
a little outside my territory. So by the time they came along, at the time I was reviews editor for Digital Camera World, so I tried to find reviewers who actually knew about sports photography, because they had to be better than somebody like me just kind of muddling through. So I have used the A9, not the A9 II, and certainly not the A9 III, but I've used all the 7s. I don't know how many variations on the Alpha 7 there are. There's quite a few. I owned an A6000 for a while. I've used a 6400 and a 6600. I've used the FX30. That's quite interesting. That's Sony's APS-C cinema camera.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've used quite a lot of them. Glad you reminded me about the Minoltas, because I did have a 5D for a while. I don't think I ever shot with the 7D, but the 5D was quite good. But then that was back in the day when we thought 6 megapixels was fine.
Yeah.
Probably isn't.
Well, I think like for those who may remember or use any Minolta cameras, know that they were a little bit like Pentax. Their cameras were always very well built, very well put together. Ergonomically, they're quite nice. The grip was really nicely shaped, so it fits in your hand quite nicely. It had a bit of weight to it, but I think for those who use SLR, especially for bigger lenses, you will appreciate a little bit weighty body just to balance the lens out a little bit. I personally love the Minolta SLR. My brother also, a Minolta fan way back in the film days. So yeah, he had a few collections, and I also got the Dynix 9, which is the still the fastest mechanical shutter ever produced for a film camera, mirror camera.
Yeah, I never used that camera, but I'm just trying to wrap my brains to think how many. So after Sony took over Minolta,
yep,
there were a couple of Sony digital SLRs.
Yep.
Before Sony swapped to this weird SLT
translucent thing,
which they persisted with for a long time.
Yeah.
So that was all quite weird. Who would still have the mirror but have a digital viewfinder? That's what they did. It must have seemed like a good idea at the time. I've also used a few of the little Cybershot point and shoots. They're all right. And in my cupboard, I've got a Sony Cybershot R1.
Oh, the Cybershots.
I know, it's one of the weirdest bridge cameras ever.
Back in the heydays of point and shoots, like Sony, and then you obviously got the other big brands like Canon, Nikon, Olympus, they all have really popular point and shoots. Just a little bit sidetracked a little bit. Do you guys ever remember Casio also made a lot of point and shoot cameras? I think they call it, what they call Exim? I think called Exim, right?
Exelim, yeah.
Something like that.
Some of those were okay, actually, I think.
Yeah, and funny enough, when I was in Japan in March this year, I still see a lot of people using Casio point and shoot cameras on the street.
Yeah. I think they could be a comeback, Jimmy. They could become cult cameras. Buy them all.
Yeah, buy while you can, or maybe manufacturer will somehow resurrect them a little bit. Just like Panasonic. Was it Panasonic? They just relaunch a bridge camera.
Funny you should say that. Just before we came on air, I was asked if I'd like to review that, so I'm weighing that up. I mean, you should do
it for us, for the sake of us, so we can all read about it.
It'll be like a trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I will, but I've always found them disappointing in the past. Any kind of small sensor, long zoom bridge camera, I've never found them particularly good. But maybe this time it'll be different.
Well, it was a thing. Remember, it was a thing. That's
Well, I guess it was at a time when digital SLRs were prohibitively expensive, and even now you still can't really get that kind of zoom range.
Yeah.
In a DSLR or mirrorless lens. I mean, whether it's worth it or not, what the image quality is going to be like past about halfway. I guess if I review it, I'll remind myself. But I'm not expecting a lot. But
you need to reset your standard a little bit when you review that.
Yeah, right. I think so.
Chuck just replied, and I've been on the lookout for the Minolta Hawkeye 58mm 1.2 at a decent price. Ooh, that's a very special lens. I don't think. In fact, actually, quite a lot of older Minolta lenses were quite popular, and because of the recent resurrections of film cameras, and quite a lot of these older lenses suddenly become like a golden lens. We all of them trying to fight for the same lens, and some of these weren't particularly good or particularly high-performing lenses, but they were rare, and people just want to get hold of them. Just got like a collection piece, or somehow they may have a certain look. We'll talk a little bit about look on lenses, and they just want that kind of vintage, big glowy look when shoot wide open 1.2, and so that might be it. I also want to hear from you guys as well if you're listening right now. And once again, welcome everybody. What's your think of your view about Sony, and why they grow so big to the day they are these days for the last 10, 12 years. And there's a reason for it, and I think we want to maybe share a couple of our own thoughts about that. So let's go back a little bit. We started talking about like Minotas and Sony taking over Minotas, and they converted their DSLRs into kind of like mold them into the early days of alpha cameras. But I have to say that the early days, even though you might say that's a bit weird, Rod, this translucent mirror thing, EVF kind of hybrid camera, conceptually is quite weird, but they weren't bad. I think the AF was pretty decent. They were very fast, and it's actually quite a good camera to shoot with. I held a couple of them before, and they're quite solidly built.
I'm trying to remember which ones I used. I know I had the A33 for a while. I think I shot with the A55, but there were others. But I'd have to dig back through the archives. So quite a few confusing variations at the time. But I have shot with them, and they are, I admit, quite good. I just think it's such a mad idea having a mirrorless camera that still has a mirror. And they also needed. This kind of, they still had phase detect AF.
They have, yes, they were phase detect, yes, yep.
Through onto a little sub mirror, onto a regular phase detect autofocus sensor, just like a DSLR. But they also had the other AF from the EVF in where the pentaprism would have been, which was fed by the other half of the translucent mirror. So half the light went through to the sub mirror and the AF sensor in the base. The other half went up to the viewfinder area where you had another sensor. Yeah. So camera with two sensors and a mirror.
It's always sounded like to me that they, like the plug-in hybrid in the car world. Like it's not quite fully electric. it's kind of in between, and there's a combustion engine. There's an electrical motor. They kind of like switching in between them to do certain magic.
The self-charging hybrid camera. If only the flipping of the mirror. If only the energy could be harvested to charge the battery.
Yeah, the battery actually wasn't too bad. The alpha camera battery life.
I think it was all right. I think it's on a par with not quite as good as DSLRs at the time as our core, but then my memory it was a while ago, and I'd have to look up the figures. But I think at the time as well, I remember the Canon DSLRs, the consumer DSLRs, the battery life wasn't terrific anyway. So Sony probably looked pretty good.
Yeah, and Andrew just said, I never liked the Sony Ergonomics. We can definitely talk about that. This is one thing that I definitely do not like about Sony cameras. However, since we talk about the early alpha cameras, because they were literally the evolutions of the original Minolta DSLRs, the early DSLRs from Sony were actually quite good to hold. I think the groups were really nicely shaped. I just did not understand why when they transitioned out from DSLR to mirrorless, they didn't follow the same kind of ergonomics. They just suddenly went with this horrible boxy design, just impossible to hold comfortably.
It sounds like you've got an opinion about this then, Jimmy.
I don't think I'm the only one. I look like Andrew's another one now, isn't it? And in fact, if you ask a lot of people, I think they all say that the Sony cam, obviously it's personal. Some people might find it quite easy to hold, but I think majority will agree that other brands, groups are way better than Sony. Canon, Nikon, you name it. I think if you talk about shape-wise, I think definitely Sony probably ranked the least.
I think so. It's bizarre kind of setup. You've got technically some of the best cameras also being, according to a lot of people, some of the most boring. Although I think Sony and Panasonic, or Panasonic Lumix S, they might be in a bit of a race to produce the most boring cameras. I'm not sure. I think the Sony Alpha is slightly more boring than the Lumix S cameras, but I think the Lumix S lenses might be a little bit more boring than the Sony ones. It's quite close. It's quite close, but it's a curious thing, and I think Angelo Playful One said earlier on that what Sony did was to get into video before everybody else, and I think that's perfectly true. I think Sony got into video when everybody else saw why. What's the point? And then we eventually found out what the point was, didn't we? So I think that had a lot to do with it, but there's a whole bunch of things. The number of lenses that you could get and now can get is still amongst the best and the widest variety for the widest range of makers.
Yeah, I also wonder, like because we all know the G Master lenses are quite good, and because of
understatement, yes.
And Minotas, while we talk about Minota, I had a suspicion there are quite a bunch of those original Minota optical engineers probably still being employed by Sony under the wings and continuing the developments of the lenses through time. But obviously, we're talking about like, I don't know, 15 years now since they were taken over by Sony, something like that. I'm not entirely sure when that was.
That sounds about right. But then the Alpha DSLRs and the SLT cameras, they carried on for a little while.
Yep.
So I think for quite a while we had all these Alpha lenses that may or may not have had a lot of DNA in common with the old Minolta lenses. And I think what's interesting is a lot of these old DSLR film lenses, not DSLR, these old SLR film lenses are actually not bad.
No.
Not bad on a digital sensor, and I suspect that Sony sensor is probably more tolerant than some for older lenses. I don't know how they've done that. Maybe the arrangement of the micro lenses at the edges of the frame or whatever. So I've noticed, for example, that I can put an old Voigtlander Leica M mount lens on my Sony, and it's fine. I can put it on the Canon, and the edges just turn magenta. So there's clearly the Canon is clearly less tolerant to higher angles of light from these older lenses, and I wonder if Sony sensors were from the start just a little bit more tolerant. Don't know. Don't know.
And Andrew Banner talked about the early Alpha cameras, also being a Minolta guy as well. He used to use Minolta Dynix 9. Let me show you my Dynix 9. I have a special one right here.
You got everything. I can't believe it.
I have a museum right here. Okay, right. This is a special Dynix 9 here. You can see this is the titanium. I call it Sony. So this is the TI version. So this has actually got a titanium shell, so it's a little bit lighter than the regular version, and also because the titanium's got the titanium color, which is very easily scratched. But yeah, it's.
I thought titanium was supposed to be tough.
It's tough, but you can scratch it. You can still easily scratch it, and also they have different grays and different type of alloy mixed together. I mean, to make it harder or harder to scratch. But they are lighter, they are stronger. But like I said, the early days of Sony cameras very much shaped like this. If you look at the grip, that reminds you of the early days of Alpha cameras, right? Because they were like that, and it's very, very comfortable, big enough for the hand. It's just really good to hold. Just nothing like today's A7 or A9 series. The group just very, very different.
You can say that again. Mind you, they have changed and improved. I mean, I've only got an A7 II here, and every replacement for it Sony redesigns the grips, but it still seems to end up much the same. But it's I've got everything the wrong way around here. So it's not a great grip, if I'm honest. And the controls don't exactly fill you with joy. I mean, they do the job, but but I think the A7 ergonomics are better than the A6000 series, which.
I think because of size, right? The 6000 series is a little bit slimmer, a little bit shorter, and that wouldn't help either.
What was the lens you had on that Minolta you just showed us?
This is the kit lens, believe me or not. This is the 28 to 75 2.8 constant aperture. This is not the pro lens. But just a kit lens. But it's got a constant 2.8 aperture, which is kind of rare. Like a lot of the kit lenses were 3.5 to 5.6 variable aperture, but this is actually a constant 2.8.
Well, probably in those days, zooms weren't as ubiquitous as they are now.
Yep. Yeah, but it's actually a pretty good lens, at least on film anyway. I haven't tried it on a digital camera, but it looks fine on the film. But yeah, Rob Track's in the house, and that's good to see him as a fellow YouTuber, and also he's also a big Michael Four Third guy as well. So he's shared a thing or two about thinking about Sony. I think I can see a lot of the comments that are popping up now, and I think they all talk a little bit about autofocus and the focus on videos. Definitely made kind of maybe catching the right wave at the right time about things are transitioning from being just stills only into more hybrid and video focused market, and especially the video market has been growing at a consumer level for the last 5-8 years, and I think that really made a push for Sony. And also, and like I think quite rightly so, and I think I'm just trying to get the comment somewhere. Angelo Playful One has also say Sony and Panasonic are electronic companies having a market in broadcast cameras and wanted to enter the photography and cinema market. Yeah, but I think you're quite rightly so. And you can also say about Fuji as well, actually. And broadcast cameras, Sony is big. Canon also very big in broadcast cameras as well. And in the broadcasting stadium and things like that, I think autofocus are also quite important, especially for sports. I think they took a lot of that expertise from these engineers who designed those cameras into the smaller market as basically when the technology is starting to improve, processors getting more powerful, the electrical motor in lenses getting faster. I think things are becoming more applicable and also easier to design for smaller cameras like what we have today. But I think you're right. I think Sony made a move and made the right move at the right time about the not only transitioning to the mirrorless market and pushing that way, but also incorporating the video side of it, and also continue to improve the AF. I think AF is definitely one of the shout-out features for most Sony cameras, and especially in the last few years.
Yeah, and do you think marketing has had a lot to do with it too, and Sony's strength in media generally? Because Panasonic, I know I'm being facetious, but Panasonic's known for video cameras and bread makers and hair straighteners and stuff like that, whereas Sony's got its media division, and it seems more like a media company. But also Sony's been very vigorous in getting YouTubers and influencers and independents on board. So it's like for a while it seemed like everyone had a YouTube channel, had an A7S3.
Well, it's an interesting it's an interesting thing about YouTube, because remember the early days of YouTube. Well, I wouldn't say early days, but at least 6-7 years ago, most people or most influencers or YouTubers were filming their contents with Panasonic cameras, the GX series, and many of them were that. And then all of a sudden, they all jumped to Sony, and so that there was a big kind of a wave of content creators and filmmakers just suddenly dumped the GX Panasonic cameras and all jumping over to Sony. And I possibly thinking is because I think you could downright blame a lot of people who are kind of promoting shallow depth of field, the cinematic look, filmic look from that you gain from bigger cameras, bigger setups. Because Panasonic at the time hasn't got a full frame camera for videos, all they had were micro Four Thirds. Sony was either APS-C or full frames, and so when they sort out their video capabilities and everything, that I can achieve a better look with that. And I know people at that time, Canon had the cine cameras and already the DSLR, the 5D Mark III, 4, they all do similar jobs, but it's very different in a way that because they weren't mirrorless to start with, and compared to Sony was definitely more open about adapting, allowing people to adapt lenses. They're even promoting people to use other lenses on their body in the early days when the A7 series or A9 series, actually A9 wasn't around yet, A7 series haven't got a lot of the native lenses from Sony. They haven't got G Masters yet, so they had a lot of Zeiss lenses, but even the range was very limited, so they were encouraging people to use adapter from Canon EF lenses. Do you remember that? There were so many people early days adapting Canon EF lenses left, right, and center to Sony body for filming.
Well, the EF mount is still widely used in kind of mid-level cinema cameras, like Blackmagic, for example.
Yep.
And does Arri do anything with a EF mount, or is it all? It's an all Arri mount, P mount. But it is interesting. I think. Do you think that perhaps because Canon had its cinema line, they really didn't try very hard with the mirrorless cameras? Maybe it would have been different.
It's like two things. I mean, obviously, don't quote me, and I'm only speculating here. But I think there are a couple of things we can look at. First of all, I think it's a Japanese culture thing, and it's almost like Sony. Sony is also a very stubborn company. If you look at the early days of Sony's, and I'm not talking about the camera departments, but also like just pure looking at the TV market. They all think about the Bravia never dies, right? You know, the CRT technologies is going to be there for good, but they never really thinking about moving forward with the LCD panels, flat panels, and they would never really invest in any of those stuff. And it's kind of similar in most cases. If you look at Olympus and Canon, Nikon, they all have this kind of similar Japanese cultural influence within the corporations. If something is working so well, you know, why fix it? You know, we just have to keep improving what we have rather than breaking the mold. You know, it's not something that they're really into. And secondly, I think that and another thing is probably they don't want to split the resources and trying to convince people to a new line internally. You know, their DSLR or SLR is very well established. They have a bunch of professionals using it. The medium enthusiast market is very well established as well. They don't really care at that time. I think they thought the numbers looking good, and we're still number one in the world. You know, we have all the sales number to back it up. They just never saw it coming. You just like Sony, the Bravia TV. You know, they think, you know, oh, we're number one in the world, but who knows? 2 years later, all this LCD panel come out and overtook them.
Yeah, you know, Sony probably thought the Trinitron was going to rule the world of television for centuries, and then, like you say, LEDs came along, and suddenly everyone realised that a Trinitron weighed about as much as a skip full of concrete and wasn't very easy to move around the house or put anywhere. I once had to do a group test of widescreen TVs back in the CRT days.
Oh wow!
And one of them was a 32-inch Trinitron, and I had to get people to help me get it up the stairs to my office because I couldn't do it on my own. And the polystyrene packaging and these things come in just couldn't take the weight. It just disintegrated around this massive TV. So, Trinitrons were good, but you know that was So I mean, I think it's quite. You can look at it quite a few different ways. I think culturally, it's definitely has a big part of it, and like most things, you know, I had a luxury to speak to some of these people in the past, and it's very interesting. They like to listen to new ideas, but very, very rarely they would take it on board and use them. Yeah, I think they like to get ideas from journalists and users.
Yeah.
But then they just use them for kind of incremental shifts.
Yeah.
They're not going to change direction or do anything like that. But it's I think it's interesting as well how YouTube and the internet have lent this kind of momentum to opinions.
Yeah.
So like Sony's always had a reputation for the best autofocus, but when enough YouTube is repeated and reviewers repeat it, it becomes a fact, and suddenly nobody else is good enough, and everybody else is judged against Sony. So I think that's something that Sony has got particularly good at, getting these great tides of public opinion.
But then I must add. I mean, like, you can throw something to a YouTuber or influencer to do something, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But the thing is, they do work, and they did work very well.
They work great, yeah.
So I mean, that's the reason. I mean, I think that's the sole reason that they became so successful the way they are now, and among YouTubers or content creators, is because they work, like whether you dislike their form factor like I do, and or anything like this. But if really just looking at the capability side of it, I mean, especially from the autofocus point of view, they are phenomenal. Like they are just good.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care about all these marketing gimmicks they're throwing these days, like product focus mode, whatever. Things that they're always trying to show
go,
me.
Jimmy, let it go.
But the thing is that their AF does work, and they work very well.
I think for the video market, the face and eye AF and tracking is just pretty bulletproof. But it's interesting. I think that Canon's is probably now just as good.
Yeah.
But Canon isn't quite as good at demonstrating it or proving it or convincing other people. So it's still Sony now that has taken on this reputation as being the best, whether it is or not. I mean, I still think it's irritating that you have to choose a subject type for the AI AF. So I don't think it's 100% right in every area, but
no,
it is the one to beat.
But do you think the market today, now we talk about Sony and Canon trying to fight for the same market in the hybrid side, don't you mean like Canon may not have the same foothold in the kind of like the content creation space, but do you think it's because Sony was there first and Sony is now established within that space, and it's much harder for Canon to kind of steal the customer base from what Sony had?
I think so. I think Canon's marketing is just that little bit different. Sony's is just a bit more exciting. Canon's is very kind of professional. It seems to me, but I'm only saying this from the perspective of a UK user looking at the marketing materials for both companies. I just think that Sony pitches it slightly better at that audience. I don't really know what else Canon could do. I think the cameras are probably a good deal better than people realise.
You probably remember the days, like as recent as 10 years ago. If you go out as a professional, or not professional, as a photographer, let's say you like cameras, all you ever think about is Canon or Nikon. Let's say the big two. No one really bother about talking about Sony. But these days, in the last 4 or 5 years, like all my friends and relatives, who are kind of into cameras, they have a Sony. And the perception's very changed now, and they don't really talk about Canon and Nikon anymore. They just say, "Oh, I like Sony," because Sony is good.
Yeah. So you just have to get the weight of opinion on your side, and you've kind of got a head start there already. But I think on the video side as well, I don't think Sony's necessarily that advanced. I don't think it's always been a leader for video. So, for example, what's the only Sony mirrorless alpha camera I can think of right now that can do 4K 60 full width is the A7S III or the ZV E1, which is the same thing really, or the FX3. But in the Canon range, you've got the EOS R8, which is which is about 1,200 quid now, which can do it. But for some reason, Canon isn't very good at showing people these technical advantages when it has them. I mean, the Canon AI subject detect can work out what the subject is and switch to it, whereas Sony's at the moment cannot. So I think a lot of Sony's advantages are people believe them to be better, but technically it's often more finely balanced than that.
Yeah, that's interesting to note. I just reading another comment from Chuck. This is the last one who popped up. It's interesting about obviously it's more like full frame versus crop sensor. He recently saw Michael Forner's Emily's videos about the OM1 Mark II with the White Beast, the 150 to 400 Pro lens is better for birds than the A7 IV with the 7-200 with the 2x teleconverter. We said it many times. It really depends what sort of thing you're photographing. Obviously, for birds, people always misunderstood couple of things. First of all, yes, crop factor give you more reach, so it potentially means that the system for the same kind of reach will be smaller, simply because they can use a much smaller optics in number wise, but give you much greater reach. So that means sizes will be a lot smaller. But secondly, and also that you have to understand as a photographer how you choose a subject and how you work with the background and the foreground. Many people may always say that, oh yeah, your smaller sensor, crop sensor, won't have the same shallow depth of field, or you may not achieve the same subject separation from, let's say, the full frame camera. Technically, it's true if you're working the same distance, but then again, depending on the distance of the subject and the background together, so you kind of work that out, so you can still achieve similar sort of look with the smaller sensor, with longer lenses, for instance, and you can punch in and get that sort of separation.
I think those focal lengths as well, your background separation is not likely to be an issue.
No,
you'll get more of it with full frame, but you'll get plenty of it with the smaller sensor. But I think it's difficult comparing the results from two different systems used by two different photographers on two different occasions, because a lot depends on how well the photographer knows their subject, that location, that camera, and that lens. So it's difficult. It's difficult to say one is necessarily better than the other. I think you said a while ago as well, Jim, in one of our other conversations, that when you see other photographers work, you're seeing the best of their best, and you're comparing it to your average. And it's not exactly a fair comparison.
No, but then again, if I may add to that comment, is that also shows that you can achieve great images regardless of format.
Oh yeah,
you see pros producing stunning result with Micro Four Thirds, same as APS-C, same as medium format, full frame. You name it, they all have really great images. So does that mean that anyone is inferior than the others? It all depends on scenarios, what sort of thing you're playing with, and what sort of lighting condition you're shooting in. It all have their strengths and weaknesses. And like what you said, Chuck, would you like to lug around a heavy full frame system for like a 30 miles hike? You probably wouldn't want to do that unless you got a porter.
Perhaps the thing is the cost as well.
Oh yes.
Which
one to bring up?
The advantage is a full frame.
Yep.
If you're going to start shooting long range subjects, it's going to be expensive.
Yeah.
It's not cheap with a smaller format, but full frame, it gets very expensive very quickly. Yep. If you want the quality of lenses that actually exploit the advantage of the bigger sensor, you can get cheaper consumer lenses, but then you're losing a lot of the image quality advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you were looking for.
Yep. Yeah.
So I think long range photography of sports and wildlife quickly gets very, very expensive with full frame. So I think something like the Sony A9 III with this global shutter, no shutter distortion, and incredible continuous shooting speeds. That's an amazing camera, but you've got to consider that the lenses you would need to exploit that for the kind of photography it's designed for are massively, massively expensive and require a good deal of skill on their own.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I think
Sony's in a great place for sports photography now because of the A9 II.
Yeah,
but like the Canon and Nikon rivals, this is expensive territory.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
unless you're a sports journalist or whatever, who got the company pay for you, it's quite unlikely any sort of average photographer is gonna or willing to spend. Even you may have the budget, but you may not want to spend that budget in such a big system that you may only use it occasionally or a number of times in a year.
I think the big win for Sony might be though in getting big news and picture agencies to commit to Sony gear. I'm trying to think of, there's a deal that Sony did with a major agency recently, and it'll come back to me, I guess, shortly. But this is where Sony scores. If it can get an order for like 200 cameras and 600 lenses from a major agency, because Sony's got all the kudos and all the marketing that comes from that.
Yeah. Absolutely. The two comments are really interesting, and I'm gonna bring up one by one. And first of all, is Peter, which is kind of relating to what you just talk about, the costs. And I think this is another problem now for those who are heavily invested in full frame systems. For instance, like Peter here, like 18K worth of lenses for Sony. It's very hard for a person who invests so much into one system to swap, let's say, to move to Nikon or Canon. It's not impossible, but I don't think it makes sense. I don't think it makes sense at all to me.
No. I think I think you're better off sticking with your lenses and waiting for a better camera.
Yeah.
Because new cameras come along all the time, but when you're heavily invested in a lens system, it's very expensive to switch. And you probably don't need to, because sooner or later there's going to be a new camera that makes them all good again. Like, for example, if you're heavily invested in Sony lenses for sports and wildlife, and you're thinking that the A9 II was starting to look a bit feeble compared to the Canon and Nikon rivals, then suddenly Nikon's got the A9 III and everything changes. Your lenses are good again. The system's good again. So I think you've got to once you've invested that heavily in the lens system, you don't switch just like that.
It's always a tit for tat, right? I don't think that people should worry too much about rivaling brands are doing better than yours just because suddenly release a new camera that shoot faster than you, got better AF, whatever. We talked about this many times. All cameras are great these days. When you talk about differences, they are very marginal in normal scenarios. To be quite honest, like what Rod just said, unless you're in a situation where you need that sort of speed, when you need that kind of accuracy, or together with those expensive lenses, you're unlikely going to exploit the system to that level. And that means that majority of us who simply using a simple 24-70, 2.8, 51.2, whatever, those kind of lenses, you can easily just spend a couple of grand and get a lower end camera, still achieve the same results than buying a 6-7 grand camera.
I think as well that your best results are going to come with very deep knowledge of and familiarity with your gear.
Yeah,
that's going to get you further than buying the latest camera, because when you know exactly what your camera body is going to do and what exactly your lenses are going to do, how fast they're going to be to refocus, how well they track, which focus mode is best. It's that kind of knowledge and familiarity that gets you a good hit rate, just as much as the latest tech, I think. So, I think if you're not heavily invested in the lens system and you've got maybe a handful of consumer lenses, then you might look at another system and think, maybe I will swap. But if you've got thousands tied up in professional sports and wildlife lenses, I'd just wait for the next camera. Because
to be honest, when you get that sort of level, of lenses, you shouldn't really worry about too much about cameras. To be honest, lenses to me is still the most important things. And any cameras, as long as those lenses are paired with the camera, you should get great results regardless. I mean, I just always think like the latest features on any new cameras coming out these days, majority of these features just won't benefit me whatsoever. I mean, it's good, to try it or to use it like a novelty thing, but it will soon wear out. I'll still go back to my old self using the same mode, the same method as shit. So better optic it will benefit me in a more tangible terms than having extra features or newer, revised, improved features than what I already have. I don't think it will improve anything I'm doing. And I'm pretty sure that applies to all sorts of photographers out there too. Unless you are those, like you said, sports photographer who really need that kind of accuracy and speed to capture something very specific, then maybe that's the case. But I think that in most cases, you probably won't find yourself getting better hit rates or getting better shots just because it's got better features in the newer cameras.
No, I think all the top cameras are constantly leapfrogging each other anyway. So you might go a couple of years thinking, oh gosh, I wish I had a Sony A9 instead of this EOS R3. But then Canon does the EOS R1 and suddenly think, oh, thank goodness I didn't swap, because this is good. So you've got to just play a long game and be patient, I think. And like you say, there are very few cameras that aren't good enough.
No. By the way, Carl replied earlier, AP went Sony, full Sony 2 years ago.
That's it. Yeah. So that is a big win for Sony, and it's going to keep on paying back, because every time you see an AP photographer, they've got a Sony, and you associate the brand with that kind of high-end professionalism.
Yep, and then when normal consumers see a pro using a Sony, it's like, oh, that's a pro camera, so that's a pro brand.
That's what I've got to get. Yeah, I want to be a professional photographer. I need one of those.
Oh, at least I want to look like one. then I'll get one too.
yeah, that never worked for me, sadly.
Yeah. Well, and RJ, that's another comment I find quite interesting. Sony put their latest technologies into their consumer level cameras, and Michael thought consumer level cameras were 8-year-old technologies. But there are a couple of things I think we could kind of talk about here. Maybe just one factor is Sony does make their own sensors, and they are pretty good at making their sensors, and the sensor manufacturing is a big business for Sony. So I wouldn't be surprised. From a sensor point of view, they would outleap everybody really. And I know Canon make their own sensors too, but then what do you think, Rod?
I don't think I'd go along with the suggestion that Sony puts its best tech into its consumer level cameras. I think Sony phases in its technologies according to its marketing roadmap and the cost of the gear. I think if that was true, you'd have the A1 sensor in the Sony A7 IV, and you don't. I think they carefully stage the technologies in their cameras at different price points.
Yeah. No, I think what RJ means is probably let's put it that way. I think the A1 global sensor, global shutter sensor,
the A9 III,
the A9 III is certainly something, new, something refreshing, something that is very high level. On the other hand, let's look at Panasonic and Olympus/OM, their sensor technologies. They're pretty much stagnant in the last 10 years, almost for a long time. There's incremental updates. Obviously, the latest OM1 does use BSI sensors, so it's backside illuminated. So it's very, very different to the older series of sensor, even though they have stuck with the same resolution. But the readout speed is significantly faster on the OM1, Mark 1 and Mark 2 cameras. Panasonic went high resolution, but is not backside illuminated. It's still the traditional CMOS sensors. So there are some updates in the last couple of years from both cams. So you can't really say this is 8 years technologies. They do improve, just not as quickly. Perhaps maybe it may not have the same variety as what Sony camera has. But like you said as well, Rod, Sony does kind of stage their sensors into different levels.
Yes, yeah. And I think as well, this notion of the 4/3 consumer level cameras use A-roll technology, I think that's a bit harsh, but I think also I'd say it's fine to say that, but advances in technology on their own don't mean a lot. You'd have to say, what is the practical disadvantage of using the same tech? You might say the resolution is stuck at 20 megapixels or 25 for Panasonic. You could easily counter that by saying, well, look what happened with Fujifilm, the X-T5. You can just tip over the edge and suddenly the sensor is a bit too good for the available lenses. So you can't just say more resolution is the answer. It would be better if the OM system video features were as good as Lumix's. But then you've got to allow for Panasonic's continued development of its video features in its own Lumix G cameras. You might claim that the tech is 8 years old. I don't think that's true, because the processing and the sensor readouts have moved on. So it looks like, if you look at the specs, it's MFT, 20 megapixels or 25, nothing's changed. It's not strictly true. It's just not obvious what's changed.
No, and a lot of things does include the actual algorithm for the AF, for instance, and also all the behind the scenes stuff that's happening underneath the skin, so you can't really quite see. As a user myself, I could clearly tell you that the latest OM Mark II is, if you really compare like for like, compared to, let's say, EM1 Mark III, which is the last Olympus camera that used this kind of similar technology as the Mark II and Mark II before that, it's significantly different and faster. So like from a user point of view, you do see the improvement from there. On paper, like you said, it's 20 megapixels, the same as before. The AF is seemingly very similar. Eye and face tracking, whatever. So they had it in the Mark III as well, EM1 Mark III. So on paper, it don't sound a lot, or actually any difference at all. It's only down to when you start using it, when you start looking at the files, when you start using it, then you realize that there's a huge improvement there. So it's quite hard to actually justify unless you really kind of in the situations or actually using the camera, starting to use it and use it a lot, not just by 1 or 2 photos, and use it like every day for a whole month. Then you realize that it's actually quite a bit better. And Andrew Banner also had a comment here about OM product is refresh rate is much slower than Canon. So I think we can talk about globally as well, not just about OM versus Sony, but look at the likes of, let's say, Canon, Nikon, and all the other brands. I think in terms of product refresh, I think the fastest is definitely Sony, probably, because they have quite a good variety of stuff.
Well, yes, but how much of it is
actually new
is reskinned from other products.
Yeah.
So the A9 III is genuinely new. That's for sure. Technically, I think the body is probably. I picked one when I used it. I suspect the body is very much like the A9 II and the A9 I, because Sony doesn't work very hard on physical redesigns. So the A7R5, that's pretty much unique. But then, of course, it's been recycled into the A7CR. So that's like an A7R5 with a viewfinder chopped off, stuck in a corner. That's my analysis. So there are 2 related products that use camera designs they have already and tech they have already. What else we got? There's the Sony A6700. Well, that is kind of like the FX30, but put into the more mainstream A6000 series body. So that's not a new sensor. And the ZV-E10 Mark II, sorry to be rattling all this off. That's also the FX30 sensor, but put in the ZV-E10 body. So Sony is constantly coming out with new cameras, but they're all kind of variations and reskins and reconfigurations of what we've seen already. The number of genuinely new cameras is smaller than it appears, I think.
Yeah,
and it's often finding 3 ways to sell the same broad product.
It is, but then again, I think it's probably down to the Sony's marketing department. They have a big influence what type of products they should make or invest. And so now they have created so many lines covering literally every corners of the creative space, from stills photography to wildlife to vlogging to filmmaking to literally everything, right? So in terms of product lines, the product focus, they probably have about dozens of them. And imagine a dozen models each year.
They have sub-segmented the creator market to a degree I wouldn't have expected. RJ makes a good point. Sony's put the AI AF and I think the dedicated AI processor in the A6700 that wasn't in the A1. That's an interesting one because I think that the A1 has been left slightly high and dry at the moment. Maybe there would be an A12, but you can't call it an A12. That's quite confusing, isn't it?
It sounded weird.
But it has been left a bit high and dry because it hasn't got the global shutter of the A9 II, hasn't got the AI AF that's now appearing in other cameras. So interesting. There's still nothing else in the Sony range that offers that resolution and that speed combined. But in other respects, I think it's starting to look as if it's been leapfrogged by other cameras in the range. But I think something will happen.
Yeah,
We'll see.
We will see when it turns up. But I think that obviously the frequency also down to that now that Sony can afford to do that, and the camera department has grown so much, and they are definitely making money. And like you said, the influencer space is very important for them marketing wise, and they know that there's a now certain number of influencers in this creative space are using their kit, so it's very easy for them to market this stuff, and compared to all the others like Canon or Nikon. I don't think they have the same kind of creative space or enough user base in the creative space to actually advertise their products. Nikon, they may try, but I think at this moment in time, the most popular products are the retro series, the ZF or ZFC. I think they are the one who's still creating the most buzz out of everything compared to anything else.
The Z8 and Z9 are still very highly regarded by the people who've actually used them.
Used it, yes, absolutely.
But this is the perception, isn't it? A lot of people are judging cameras based on what other people say about them. Yeah. Rather than direct use, which is always a slightly dangerous thing.
It is. I mean, unfortunately, these day and age, and people do, recently made a video about it. Is that how influential these videos are on YouTube or any other social media platforms? When there's a very big popular person talk about something, people just simply follow the ideas and follow the conclusions or whatever they say. So if they say Sony A9 III is the best cameras in the world, it is the best camera in the world. So everyone just say it is the best camera in the world. So they would discard, like you said, the Z9. They would discard the Canon R1, everything else, because the A9 III is the best because this guy say it. So it's a dangerous space.
We're laughing about it, but it happens.
Yes, it does happen, and unfortunately, that's why like these are like old marketing techniques when people used to hire big celebrities to do certain things, wear a watch, wear certain clothes, or drive a certain car, because they need them to showcase that piece of item.
It's people have always trusted celebrities and the famous. Yeah, they trust people they like or admire. So I think that's always been a bit of a secret in marketing, and I guess what Sony's been particularly good at is getting a lot of popular creators on board.
Yeah.
And I don't think Canon and Nikon have really been terribly good at that. Whether they don't take it seriously, or whether they don't have the contacts, or whether they just can't get the same traction.
Just give you a very, very quick thing about my experience when we talk about being a social media person. Remember, we went to the photography show earlier this year, Rod, and we went around looking at different stands, talked to different people. But there was a time within the second day connect, so it may be this window issues that everyone's talking about.
Okay.
But anyway,
Jimmy, you're on a Mac. Don't give us that.
No, not me, but whoever hosting the platform, right? The server side, right, I lose the chat window for some reason. I'm just trying to get it back.
Every time you restart the chat, you lose the comments that you've had already.
Yeah, I can't get it back. Where is it gone now? And right. Anyway, we can continue to talk. Where was I? I can't remember what was I talking about now.
We're talking about the photography show and how everyone recognised you and nobody recognised me. What the hell?
No, not about that. But it's funny enough because we talk about approach and how company their focus is, or how they would see content creators, for instance. So I went to Nikon stand. No one really bothered looking at me, even though I was holding a camera, trying to get an interview, trying to do something, trying to get some information out of them. Canon did the same thing. They ignored me. Sony, however, when I went there, Sony was happy talking to me, showing me camera. Like they want to get in front of the camera. So that's the mentality. That's the difference between the different group of people. They don't mind getting involved. They don't really. As long as there's YouTube, okay, yeah, that's good. We get some exposure. We get some views. You know, they are they just open their arms. They come here. Let's talk to us. I mean, there's a very different mentalities there.
I did have quite a different experience approaching Sony from the other side of the press. I think Sony's very, very keen to cultivate independent creators.
Yeah.
But if you're working for a big publishing monolith, I think Sony thinks, well, it's not worth it. We'll go to all this effort and we'll get one review or one video. So it's quite hard to get a lot of traction with Sony as a regular old school publisher.
Yeah,
it's probably a lot easier as an independent creator, and easier still if you've got a massive subscriber number that you can show them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that helps, but a lot of the times, you know, like you can see the mentalities. Like I remember 2 years ago when I went to a different stand, it was the Loop Deck stand, and even though they know me, but the guy who were managing the stand at the time, you know, he personally didn't know me at all. So first of all, he knew that I was trying to do something. Then the second thing he asked me is, "Can you show me your channel?" He wanted to look at my numbers.
That's it. Yeah.
Then when he saw my numbers, and then it's like, "Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, what do you like to talk? What would you like to talk about?"
Bit harsh.
It was a bit harsh, but
yeah.
But that's the difference. Like I said, Sony didn't even care. Didn't even ask me about, you know, show me the channel, whatever. And they just show me talking about it in front of the camera. I have a camera trying to film things, and they just open-heartedly, you know, come here, you know, we show you a thing. What would you like to look at?
Do you know? I think that's one of the secrets to going around a photography show. You know, in the past is your lanyard, and you'd hope people knew you and you have some cards. But now you need a camera on a rig, and then people think, YouTube. Yeah, we'll speak to this guy.
But at the same time, I think they, you know, like they really want to, maybe, you know, from not only from a marketing point of view, but also they wanted you to learn about, you know, the camera, even if you don't use Sony cameras, and you know, give it a try. You know, maybe they're trying to get you over, you know, switch over the Sony cameras, because since you are in the creative space. So this is, I think, for the entire Sony company, and in the camera department at least, and they really value creators. They really don't mind, you know, like big or small, they embrace you. You know, they just want you to use their kit, because the more they have, like I said, they're already established in that space. Why don't they consolidate it even further, you know, just by absorbing everybody else's? Yeah. So I think that's a good tactics, you know, and they certainly have a brief talk every single morning. You know, like whoever comes over with a camera on YouTube, take them in.
now we know Sony's brilliant at everything. All the cameras and everything are wonderful. There must be something Sony's not doing right that it should be.
Yeah,
people must have a few thoughts about that.
Yeah, anyone think about things Sony that don't do well?
Stabilization, perhaps.
Oh, I saw there's a comment earlier about dust on sensor. I don't know how true is that. But I do notice my full frame Nikon camera does suck a lot of dust to the sensor too.
No, I mean all the Sony cameras I've used are seriously troubled by dust, but I think I've worked out why. You know how most cameras do a sensor clean when you power them down? I've never noticed my A7s doing that. They might be doing that, but if you go into the menus and use the manual sensor clean function, it's like that. It's a really aggressive one. So I suspect you have to do that now and again.
Right.
Just to really shake off.
But does it work? Does it work though?
To a degree. But I've also always found Sony mirrorless cameras to be bedeviled by dust.
Right.
I haven't got many shots taken on Sony mirrorless that don't have dust here or there. You don't always see it until you do stuff like dehaze or shift the contrast or exposure in Lightroom in a way to bring it out. Then it's everywhere. Incidentally, for those who are interested, Capture One has an AI dust removal feature. You press a button and it finds and clones out dust on a sensor you didn't even know you had.
Stop making AI stuff now. You know, like so you don't have to clean your sensor at all.
it's a one click process.
Yeah.
And I'd say typically on my Sony images, it'll find about 20 spots.
Yeah.
Even I didn't know were there, but probably would have become apparent. It doesn't get them all, but yeah, I think Sony cameras do suffer worse with dust than others I've used. So micro four thirds rarely a problem. The only time I see dust on micro four thirds is if I'm using a really wide lens, so really short focal length, and a really small aperture, because then you depth of field is in front of the lens, depth of focus is behind it, and if you get very deep depth of focus, anything on the front filters of the sensor, the filter stack, you wouldn't normally see because it'd be defocused on the sensor.
Yeah,
it's much sharper in a recorded image with very short focal lengths and very small apertures. But that's the only time I've seen it on MFT.
Well, Chuck actually made a comment about sensors 4 times bigger, full frame sensors 4 times bigger than MFT. I mean, I actually,
but then one spot, wouldn't that be 4 times worse if you're going to take that argument?
Because the same part size of
4 times bigger.
Yeah, exactly. It's same size of dust. If it's on the center, we were like a big black dot on top of it.
Yeah.
I haven't got any problem with dust because I do expose my sensor a lot when I'm changing lenses out in the open, because I shoot in the city a lot, which is very dusty, very dirty. I do the same thing with all my cameras. Now I have APS-C, micro four thirds, and full frame. I do find definitely way more dust on the full frame camera than the MFT, but also find that especially the Olympus cameras, the OM system cameras, the dust removal technology, the whatever they call it, the sonic waving ultrasonic thing.
Yeah,
it works
supersonic wave
really
filter,
well.
isn't it, or something like that? Supersonic wave filter.
Because the thing is, the difference is, I changed lenses even in the rain. So when occasionally the rain drop on the sensor, all I need to do is power it on and power it off again. Let the kind of sensor shakes itself and it disappears. The water drop just literally gone, and I could shoot again without problems. And I have cameras that are literally overworked, like 200,000 shots on the shutter, and it's been well battered, and still not a single dust on the sensor. And haven't cleaned it. I haven't cleaned the sensor at all, like manually. It's just all through the system.
I would say that using full frame Canon, Nikon, Sony, and Panasonic, Sony is by far the worst for dust, and very clearly the worst. Nikon, I've had a couple of bits and bobs. I used a Lumix S5 2X extensively for a weekend. Didn't have any dust on any images, and I don't really get any significant dust on my Canon gear. I think it is a Sony thing. It is worse on Sony. I might just, while we're talking, I might just activate the manual sensor cleaning so you can hear it. Carry on.
I'm just looking at some of the new comments here about what we talked about earlier, asking them, and the worst thing that from Sony. First of all, colors. Quite a few of you actually say that the Sony colors are not great comparatively to Sony or Nikon, perhaps. I would agree, but like I said, I haven't used any of the newer Sony cameras, but the older ones that I have tried, they often don't have the great skin tone, and I think that for a guy who shoots portrait a lot, skin tone is definitely one of the most important features that I need. Oh, I can hear it.
No, I didn't even put it by the microphone. Give me a moment.
And so it's definitely the skin tone on the Sony older Sony cameras, at least, are not as good, not as accurate. Oh, you got it
ready?
Now? Yep, go on.
Here we go. Did you hear
that? Sounds like a 20 shots continuous. Yeah,
but you don't hear that when the camera powers off. So I don't think when you power the camera off, you're not getting any dust removal automatically, or it's not full strength, because that was a proper shake. It was a proper shake. So
it's very loud.
If you do have a Sony and you're troubled by dust, do a manual dust removal or center cleaning action via the menus,
Yeah.
and that'll give it a right old shake. Too many of those, it'll probably come off completely.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, Sony colors are not the greatest, and I don't know how many of you would agree, but at least I saw 2 or 3 comments already talk about Sony colors.
It's difficult because I shoot RAW, and that kind of changes things anyway. It adds another variable. The only thing I would say is if you shoot RAW, then if you're in Lightroom, make sure you go look in the profiles to find camera matching profiles, because the default Adobe color profile is a bit but if you go into the camera matching profiles in the basic panel, you'll find color profiles that much better reflect the camera's own color rendering. I'm sure a lot of you know this already, but do take a look at the camera specific profiles in Lightroom. Makes a big difference.
Yeah, and definitely. But however, I mean, I think even at raw state, different manufacturers, the colors are always slightly different. And whenever you load up into Lightroom or any sort of raw programs, you will find that they come out slightly different. Yeah.
Because the software applies a raw profile of its own. Sometimes they match well, sometimes they don't.
So I guess that's probably why. But I do think that the Sony colors is probably a little bit harder to correct to what I would like to see, even from RAW.
Interesting.
It's mostly skin tone related, because I have a very specific eyes looking at skins, and then I always find Canon and Olympus color wise, they for skin tones are the best.
Even with raw files.
Even with raw files, and Nikon's raw files always give me quite a bit of magentas in skin tones. So always have to dial it back down in post production, which is quite weird. And always have to, like in Lightroom, I have to dial down at least by -5, from whatever it gives me, then give me the kind of slightly more neutral skin tone. And Sony was a little bit similar as well. It's got a bit more magenta hue in it, so I have to kind of dial it down a little bit more. It's always one of those things, I guess, depending what sort of thing you're photographing. If you're not really a portrait guy, I don't think it matters too much, so long that you can accept the kind of color palettes that they produce in on the screen. Right, I'm just looking at other ones here. So, go on.
RJ says Sony dust removal just shakes the IBIS. It's not ultrasonic. I think he might have a point. Or she might have a point. They might have a point. It did sound like somebody shaking the hell out of the camera.
So it's basically utilizing the IBIS itself, perhaps. It just to shake the sensor, basically.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think shaking sensor would work with some of this sticky dust, and that's why ultrasonic is definitely a bit better.
It's the trouble, because if you get any kind of fibers from animals or plants or any pollen, or any kind of spray from the sea, that's not going to shake off. That is stuck good and proper. But fortunately, that's comparatively rare.
And I'm just also reading a common, I think Gigafish, Sony's dust removal is only good for minor cloudy view. And I don't know, a cloudy view, like me haze.
What that means,
and also, it's just and the next comment say the Exmo R and the Bionics X combo seem like the best color signs for Sony. The Bionics XR, they went somewhere else, somewhat cooler.
Interesting.
From what I've heard, even Sony themselves did say I think 2 or 3 years ago now, when they released the cameras, and they did say the skin tone has been much improved. So even they admitted this earlier camera skin tone went great.
it's always improved grip and improved skin tones. Every new camera, encountered it. But I think I'm probably the last person to ask, because I'm not very sensitive to subtle hues. So.
But I guess it was a known fact for the early day Sony cameras that they weren't great for skins, and it's pretty much a known fact. Okay, and
interesting.
And anything else that you guys think that Sony hasn't done well? I don't know if it happens to newer cameras, but my experience, some of the earlier Sony cameras were that the operational side of it is quite sluggish. So I'm not talking about when you're operating the cameras, but it feels like every time you want to do something, there's a lag. And let's say accessing menu, changing mode.
Yeah, I think
there's a lag there.
Yeah, my A7 II is quite slow, and my A7 IIR is slow still.
You know, like it's never as snappy as I mean, from what I've seen now, I think like my experience with different manufacturers now, I would say Canon and Olympus cameras are quite snappy when it comes to operation. Changing mode, changing things is really quick. I'm not talking about switches or customizable buttons. I'm actually talking about when you press something, the reaction times, how the response time from the system itself is way quicker in Canon and Olympus cameras than anything else. The Sony is definitely quite slow. Panasonic Lumix, funny enough, they're also quite slow as well. Not as slow as Sony, but I do see the lag, at least feel it. There's another strange thing with my latest GX7. I'm not sure how many of you do use Lumix camera here. Is that the system somehow tends to go into deep sleep after powering off. So whenever you turn the camera back on, it will take a good couple of seconds before the system boots up. So that's quite slow. Because the Olympus camera, when you put on, you turn the camera on, it literally just half a second, it will be on, ready to shoot. But the Lumix GX7, it takes a while to actually to load up.
That stuff is really annoying because very often you need the thing to be working straight away, and you think, oh, it's gone to sleep. I'll wake it up just with a half press on the shutter release. Doesn't always work. You think, what the hell's happened? Sometimes it's just quicker to turn it off and on again.
Yeah.
Just because otherwise you're getting into this kind of weird sleep state, which seems harder to wake it up from.
It's quite hard to explain because the Lumix camera is quite weird. Like when you power it off, and let's say you power it on within the next couple of minutes, it turns back on quite quickly, just like the Olympus camera.
Right.
But if you switch it off, let's say overnight, the next morning you switch it back on again, and that's the huge delay there. That's when the 2-3 seconds kind of gap before you actually see anything happening on the screen. It does look like the camera will probably still be in the kind of like a ready state if you just switch it off temporarily. But if you leave it long enough, it really go into like a deep sleep and when it's off. And when it turns back on, almost like you have to reboot the entire system up.
Yeah.
And it's kind of strange for this day and age, but it does take that long to load up.
You still seem to get cameras that do that. I've just finished reviewing this Ricoh GR3X. That does that. If you let that go to sleep, it goes off, but the lens stays extended. So I think, it's only asleep. I'll press the shutter button. Nothing. The only way I can rouse it is just to hold the power button until it comes back on.
Oh dear.
So this is quite annoying in a camera that's supposed to be so responsive. But it's not the only one. It's not the only one.
So it's the latest Sony camera still does it? Because I remember older Sony camera did that, and then it was quite annoying as well.
What I would love for Sony to do is make a grip that I can get 4 fingers round. Because it would just make the cameras a centimetre taller in the body so that you can actually get 4 fingers around the grip.
Look, Rod, everybody wants a small compact camera. They want to beat Micro Four Thirty in terms of size, so they're making smaller and smaller.
Well, yeah, the body is fine. It is small, but it's just smaller than it's useful to be. I think any camera small enough that you can only get 3 fingers around the grip. To me, it's almost gone a bit too far.
Yeah. Just look at the old Dynix that I just showed you earlier. Look at that. It's proper grip. You can see the whole hand actually holding the grip. Proper free.
But you've got your index finger on the shutter button. I think you're cheating.
No, that's how I hold the camera.
No, see, when I'm walking around, I don't have my finger on the shutter. I'm just holding the camera like that.
Look,
and that's where I wish.
I'm a guy who is always ready to shoot, so that's why he's always on the shutter button.
Oh, stop it!
Oh dear, but yeah, I think someone did mention about ergonomics of Sony. They need to improve the ergonomics earlier. I saw one comment there. And how many of you think that Sony's body is? Let's not talk about being fashionable or nice looking, but do you all think Sony cameras are a little bit difficult to hold or not comfortable to hold for a long time? Would like to hear from you about that particular point there, because I know some of you looks like do use Sony cameras. I would like to hear your thoughts about them. For me personally, I do still think that Canon and Olympus makes the best grips. The Nikon, the older SLR cameras like the D6 and then also the old film cameras were all fantastic grips as well. They've got big, chunky, thick grips, so like really comfortable to hold for a whole day. Definitely. A pro who used it for long hours would appreciate. For that's what I would like to add to it, because I think modern day cameras now, the modern design is that not only they're getting smaller and slimmer, but they almost make it for people who are 3 feet tall. They just don't have the same size.
People with only 3 fingers, yeah.
Yeah. I know that we all talk about being like things small, but there is a point when you think that things becoming too small, it's just not practical anymore. And something that I would like to hear from you as well. How many of you think that cameras these days are getting just way too small to hold, or not comfortable to hold, just because they want it to be small and tiny? There is a strength about being small cameras, like easy to transport. I get that. It's good for traveling, it's lighter, and easy on the back. Yeah, that's all true as well. But for you as a photographer who like to shoot a lot, we go out, would you like to hold comfortably, or would you like to, easier to go from point A to point B?
So I have a very high opinion of Sony's G Master lenses. They're extremely good, but they are quite big. And if you want to use these extremely good lenses that are quite big, it would be nicer if the bodies were just a little bit bigger too. They'd be nicer to handle.
Yep. Okay, right. I'm just looking at quite a few comments popped up recently. I'm just reading some of them. It's kind of funny. Oh yeah, forgot about that.
The natives with webbed fingers. I know people from Norfolk, so steady on. But yeah, they do. Yeah.
Carl actually also mentioned that G9 has a good grip. Yes, the G9 has good grip. The G9 Mark 1, not the Mark 2.
Mark, I should never have sold it. There's another camera I should never have sold.
Yeah, the G9 Mark II has a very, very nice grip as well, and that's for sure.
Okay.
And the Lim 200 said that the S5 II grip is nice. Basically, that's the G9 Mark II grip. And I don't know. I'm just, I don't know. I just don't quite this kind of boxy look, a boxy feel of it. It's not round enough for me to wrap around my finger. Just somehow it just feels. It's all not as nice.
It's all sharp edges, isn't it? That I think Sony's the worst for the sharp edges design look, but yeah.
Andrew said, "I'm in Norfolk."
Yeah. Oh. He's allowed to say it then. He's allowed to say it.
So okay, it's kind of sidetrack a little bit. Like, just look at grip shapes and forms. So there's the two cameras here. That's the OM, and also the Lumix grip. The OM seems to be a bit thinner, but it's definitely more rounded. And if you look at the side profile, that's when you see the more contour look compared to the Lumix camera. And that's the same thing for Sony. Sony's quite straight as well. It's not kind of curved up like the OM or Canon grips. Canon does that. It just feels more comfortable when you hold it.
So I wouldn't recommend the R8 unreservedly, but typically for Canon, there isn't a sharp edge on there. Everything is chamfered and smooth. All the edges are just slightly contoured. So together with a kind of soft matte finish, this feels quite smooth and rounded compared to this, which feels like it's been chiseled from a quarry somehow.
It looks to me that Sony is almost like the Tesla in the car world, They're trying to be...
the Cybertruck.
Yeah, just sharp edges, clean look, with not many buttons on.
Well, there's not many on the top, but there's enough on the back, I think. to make
Yeah.
up for it.
That's good.
No, but it's interesting. I think I'd change the design and feel. A lot of people complain about the menu system, but I can't quite go along with that, because you might argue that Sony's old menu system wasn't logical, but you still learned it soon enough. If you use the camera day in, day out, you'll learn where stuff is. So I found when Sony swapped to the new menus, everyone was saying, "Oh, this is marvelous, so much better." I thought, well, I don't know where stuff is now. I got used to where it was. Now it's moved again.
It is true. I think that I know a lot of reviewers, especially on YouTube, always complain or talk about a menu system from different brands. But like you said, if you use one brand for a long time, you get used to it. Then you learn where they are. You just go straight to that menu, and without having to dig into or think about it. Only when you're switching system, that's when you have the struggle and trying to look for things. But then again, if you're constantly using two systems or even three systems, like constantly, you remember them as well. It's just about memorizing it. It's not so much about one is more difficult than the others.
No, I think you're right. And if you are using two systems, you're probably using them in two completely different contexts, so you don't get them muddled. You might be using one for video and one for stills, completely different setup on one camera to the other, but it's a different activity. It doesn't matter that it's different. I think I can imagine where you can run into trouble if you're using one camera for completely different sets of conditions, and you're having to mess with custom settings for this, then a different custom setting for that. Then maybe you've got a camera where the image quality and profile settings are applied to both stills and video. Yeah, because that's a real nuisance. I was going to say something else there. So I think there is a lot to be said for using a couple of different systems. Yeah, or having two cameras, one set up one way and one set up another way.
Yeah.
Well, personally, I can never remember what the hell custom settings I set up last time. So
that's why I never use custom setting. I've never ever used custom setting, like I always say, I don't use all the features on any new camera these days. All I ever do learn about how to change the shutters, shutter speed, ISOs, white balance, occasionally AF settings, things like that. And these are kind of the things that I usually adjust in the cameras, and anything else is like a surplus to me. I kind of never look at them. Like changing the colors and brightness of the EVF, I never even touch that sort of thing. I just don't do it. No. And one thing I actually do the first thing in any camera is to turn off the beep on the cameras. I hate the beeps on the cameras, and I don't know why they still do the beeps on the cameras. Why didn't they just get rid of the beep for any cameras?
That's because you trust your autofocus. Not every camera is quite so trustworthy, and it's quite reassuring to have a beep.
Not really. I mean, even though that the beep or not, even though the system tells you it's in focus, quite a lot of the time they still miss it. Depending on situations, and especially in backlit, something that I always talk to you about. Most cameras struggle with backlit. It's just something that they don't do well. Okay, let's see anything else in here. I like boxiness. For substantial grip, but I have the original EM1, which also has a nice grip. Okay. So let's change the topic a little bit now with Sony. Okay. We'll talk about the past a little bit since the Minolta days. We talk about the rise and how they kind of push influence the video side, the tech side, making it popular in the YouTube space, the creative space, and it's kind of almost like a de facto system now for creators. Now let's look a little bit into the future, and maybe you guys can chip in a little bit. What would you like to see Sony do next? What sort of camera system would you like to see from them? I know some of you actually talked about lenses. That Sony doesn't make lenses, and I think they do make lenses now. And but what sort of lenses would you like to see Sony release or make in the future?
Sony doesn't make lenses.
I saw a comment earlier. They don't make lenses, but I think probably talk about early days. That's when they had Zeiss.
Or maybe that's the conversation about Tamron and Sony having part shares in Tamron. On which subject, because it's a lot cheaper for my Sony. I don't have a Sony lens. I have a Tamron 20 to 40 f2.8, which is quite handy, short but handy zoom range for me. If only Sony made one, but they don't. So I bought a Tamron.
Yeah. So yeah, I would like to hear from you. What would you like to see from Sony, and what would you like them to do in the future? And Rod, let's go to you then. What do you think Sony is gonna happen, or what do you think we're gonna focus on in the next few years?
Would Sony ever be brave enough to attempt a retro camera, or do you think Sony knows its limits and wouldn't attempt it?
But the thing is, for them to make a retro cameras, they have to have some heritage. They have to have some kind of old cameras they can base on.
Do they? Do they?
I mean, like, well, you can make a retro style camera, but then you kind of lose that magic. Like the Fuji did very well with the kind of like a lookalike X100 series, X series, and like the pen, they based on the pen from Olympus, and the Nikon, the ZF, the ZFC, they based on the old FM cameras. Canon can potentially make an AE1 retro looking kind of digital cameras, but Sony, what do they have? Would they base on the old Minolta camera? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that has to make it up, I guess. But I think most of the people buying retro style cameras these days are young enough never to have used the originals. So maybe it doesn't even matter. Maybe you just have the designer camera that looks old fashioned.
Yeah.
I don't know. Carl's got a brilliant point here. I'd love a top screen on a Sony. Top screen should be compulsory
for any camera. For any. I do agree. Something that I miss on any Olympus cameras, even from the early days, even when I was switching, is that I missed the top plate that my old Canon camera had. There's a top plate.
Yeah.
Information were there, easy to see. You don't have to look through the viewfinder. Hang on. Hopefully not. No, please come back. Please come back. No. Okay. Right. Something happened again. Can you guys still see me or hear me? There we go. Oh, you're back. You're back.
Yeah, that's me that time.
That's you this time. That's you this time.
I think so.
Okay, I got one interesting one here, and I think Lim2001 Burger said revive the RX1R line. I do like the RX1, which is kind of like the Leica Q rival camera, full frame, compact, fixed lens camera, and I think is a cool camera. But I think the RX1 came out at the wrong time, and I think if they do one now, it would be a very tempting proposition for me, at least. And let's say if I don't want to go with the Leica, for instance, and a Sony would be a very, very good, tempting alternative, potentially be a little bit cheaper, and it would be quite good. I do like the RX1. And back in the old days, it has a kind of like a pop-up EVF, just like the RX100. It's just like a bigger brother of it. Full frame sensor, 35 f2 Zeiss lens. Oh, it's a dream. It's a dream system. It's quite compact as well compared to the Leica Q. It's a significantly smaller and lighter camera. And so I think it could be a winner there. I mean, like Olympus, I want them to make the Pen F. For Sony, I do want them to make the RX1. Rod is gone again.
Not me. I'm still here, Jimmy. My window's gone.
You turned black here. I can hear you.
Have I?
Yes.
I must have kicked the light out. No, I think it must be your end because I'm still here.
Okay, I'm going to close you. Let's see if you can rejoin again.
Oh, okay. Bye.
So let's see what else is here. And Gigafish wants an A7C. Oh, there you go. You're back. That's fine. And Dennis wants a new 28mm G Master 1.8 f2 and a 40G with 1.8. And okay, so new small primes, and that will be good too, I guess.
I think Sony's had a go at doing small lenses with moderate success. I do like there's the 24 2.8.
Yeah.
It's it's a bit iffy towards the edges of the frame, I think.
Yeah.
The 40 f2.5 and 50 f2.5, really nice little lenses.
Okay. Right. Rod is gone again. Oh no. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened today. Today is not a good day for streaming, and unfortunately, first it was me, and now is Rod. Rod somehow can't really jump in for some reasons, and it's not happening. I don't know. It's me or it's him.
Sorry,
there you go.
Jimmy. I don't know what's going on. Just don't ask me anything. I'll just sit here.
Oh, there you go. It's gone again.
Oh,
no.
What are you doing?
Oh dear. Oh dear. Right, hang on. We're going to wrap up sooner in that case. Hopefully, this issue will be resolved next week. So let's continue to look through your comment to see if there's anything else here. Ever since development of the E5, they have used material around the shutter box and sensor that limits static these talk about the ultrasonic dust removal system. Yeah, I do like that. And someone else earlier said that they haven't cleaned the sensor since 2012, and I can concur that. You know, my original EM1 Mark II is still with me, and it's got no dust on the sensor, and that thing is well used. That camera is to the point that I think it's 2 months end of life. It's amazing. I think
a lot of it depends as well on how far the infrared filter is in front of the sensor. Because that can kind of, if the dust falls on that infrared filter, it's going to kind of defocus on the sensor. So that, I think that's a factor. But I've got a feeling some other brands do have ultrasonic sensor cleaning. Maybe not Sony, judging by the noise mine makes. But I can't remember who else.
But the thing is that from all I've seen, Olympus/OM System is the only company to ever kind of market the dust removal system actually being a prominent feature compared to all the other camera manufacturers. You know, they all just basically list it in a spec. Oh, we got dust removal thing in the camera. Yeah. But Olympus specifically shout about the ultrasonic dust removal system. They even showcased, you know, when the drop of water hit the sensor, you know, and when the dust removal system turned on, you know, it just basically vaporized. You know, it even showcased that in multiple materials in the past. So it's something they're quite proud of. I'm pretty sure that's something that's quite different to any other system on the market.
Perhaps so.
Yeah, they may even have patented the mechanics, so that's why people can't use it. I'm not entirely sure, but don't quote me on that.
Oh, is Dennis saying Sony does have it on the A7R5? Interesting.
And I'm just looking at that. I think there was one comment earlier, and somebody asked me, "Am I still an OM System ambassador?" Yes, I am. So I am still an ambassador with them. So let's see, looking at that. Okay, one news featured by firmware.
Ultrasonic sensor cleaning is mentioned for the A7R5. I don't know if it's the only one, but yes, it does seem to be a thing now.
Okay. Well, maybe the newer Sony cameras will have no dust issue.
It is quite important though, but I've spoken to other people who use Sony gear, and they seem to take it that it's just because it's a full frame camera, big sensor, no mirror to kind of block off the front of the camera. But I think there's a bit more to it. I think perhaps earlier Sony cameras just didn't have very effective dust removal.
Right. So we can see all the comments from you guys. And Rod, what would you like to see Sony do next?
Design a new camera body. I like that. Would be good if they could do that. That'd be wonderful. No, I'm being stupid. I think Sony's technologies are always right at the forefront, but I do think the camera designs are very staid, not very comfortable. It'd be nice to see Sony spend a bit of money on the physical design, not just the technology. I think Sony feels that it's already created the perfect camera design and they can just keep on refining it. I'm not sure everyone would agree, though.
No,
So
by the looks of the comments, not really.
I do think Sony's become a bit blinkered about the physical design of its cameras.
Yeah,
You quite like the RX100 series, don't you?
I do.
I just can't get on with them. They're too small and faffy for me.
Well, I mean, I think from a point and shoot point of view, I think that's a great camera. I mean, I like the fact that it has a hidden EVF. If I really want to use it in emergency case or in a very bright sunny day, and that tiny, even though there's a tiny EVF, it really does help because the back screen just not bright enough to see it, and it's still it's the expensive point and shoot camera, but it's a slightly bigger sensor, but it does give me quite good quality in good lights, so it's okay.
I'm just not quite convinced that one has to have a pop-up EVF. If there's room for an EVF, why do you have to hide it? I mean,
that is true. That is true.
For just a couple of millimeters here or there.
Yeah, that is quite true.
Just seems like a bit silly showboating to me, but maybe there's a good reason. I don't know.
I'm not sure. Now you mention it, yeah, that's quite true. Why don't they just show it? Make a hole in the back, and then you have the EVF right there.
Yeah, well.
Yeah. So that, I mean, I think personally, I mean, I would like to see Sony. Well, there are a couple of things I want to see Sony. First of all, is maybe streamline some of the product lines. I think it's getting a bit more confusing for consumers. You know, it's just too many models, too many lines, too many subcategories. It just. Let's say if I'm new to the camera world, you know, just interested in Sony products and just look at the catalog. Oh my God, this is like got 100 different cameras in front of me.
Yeah, just imagine you go into a Sony shop saying, I want to start vlogging. What camera do I get? There's about 6 or 8 cameras you can recommend, and you'd be there all day trying to figure out which one. You've even got so many cameras which are essentially the same technology. I mean, do you get, should I get the new ZV-E10 Mark II, or should I get the FX30, or maybe the A6700? Or then if you're going full frame, should it be the A7S III? Should it be the FX3? Should it be the ZV-E1? All the same basic tech, but just kind of reskinned for a different audience.
I mean, I think that's the problem with Sony product lines, and not about, you know. So I think they need to, you know, perhaps streamline some of the products and just group them into a product. And like you said, some of them are technically the same camera. You know, it's just slightly different, you know, exteriors and a body shell and something like that. So that's something I always don't like. Yeah, and we talked about the body design, obviously, that I would like them to improve that. But I also like to, like I said, maybe revive the full frame point and shoot camera like the RX1. And I think I like to see that. And only because personally I'm quite interested in acquiring one, and not so much RX1, but let's say like a Q, kind of equivalent kind of thing. So like, if it given me a choice, would I get the Fujifilm X100 or get a Leica Q or a full frame alternative, I would go for the full frame. So I already have the Micro Four Thirds cameras. I kind of feel like I don't want to get an APS-C and fixed lens camera.
I use MFT APS in full frame. I do find APS-C slightly awkwardly in the middle. If I was only using one format, that would make sense instead of the others. But since I use the 3 of them, APS-C feels the one that's kind of in no man's land a bit. But I've got a question for you. Do you like the look of the RX1 or the RX1R?
I do like the RX1R. The look, I don't mind it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Why didn't Sony make the A7C look like that?
I don't know. Maybe the original design is already gone.
So the RX1R does look very nice. I mean, I can understand there might not be room for you might need a thicker body for the interchangeable lens to have interchangeable lenses and maybe IBIS. But I think the RX1R looks so much cooler than the A7C. Yeah. So it's a shame they couldn't revive that design, the A7C series. But you know, that's just the thing. If you want the RX1R back, I'll go along with that. But with interchangeable lenses, better still.
Like a proper camera.
Proper camera.
The RJ actually just say that Sony would make the new RX1 with a vlogging screen, like a flippy screen. quite possibly. Quite possibly, if they do one.
They would, and of course that 35mm lens would be no good for vlogging anyway. So
No.
I don't know what Sony would do, but yeah, that would be my fear. They'd try to modernize the concept for a also creator audience.
You know what? One of the appeal that I had with the RX1 was because of the Zeiss lens, and I'm very doubtful if they're gonna release a revised RX1, it won't be a Zeiss anymore, because I don't think the agreement's still there. So like they would now have the G Master lenses. So I'm not entirely sure whether they would continue that.
I think it's a kind of funny relationship with Zeiss, because I know that Zeiss were involved in the manufacture of some of the Sony zooms.
Yeah.
I think in the same way that Leica is with Panasonic, but I never felt that the Zeiss zooms, which were possibly made by Sony for all I know,
yeah,
I didn't think they were very good.
No, I
think
I've heard comments they're not great either.
No, the Zeiss primes, I think probably these days might not match the resolution of the G Masters, but they would have a particular look, a character. I think that's quite different. But I don't think the Zeiss zooms were that great.
No, I mean, I'm always going for the look, like you always know. They know me anyway. I'm like, sharp in the ultimate sharpness isn't particularly my interest. So because I used to use a lot of Zeiss lenses, I still have a couple of Zeiss lenses with my Leica, and I do like that aesthetic, and that's the appeal for the Sony RX1, because it has this 35mm f2 Zeiss lens on it, and it does have that look that I really like. So yeah, it would be interesting to see if Sony would revisit that, simply because the X100 from Fujifilm is a big seller, and Sony hasn't quite got, like you said, the retro thing, is not really in Sony's book. The RX1 could potentially be that if they really want it to be. So that could potentially, steal some sales from Fujifilm and maybe even Leica. And if they can undercut Leica for price, which they had been doing with the RX1, because compared to the original Leica Q, the RX1 was, at least $1.50 cheaper.
Just imagine the RX, and just imagine RX1R2 with the 61 megapixel sensor and perhaps a slightly wider lens. And,
I don't need 61 megapixel. Give me 24.
Wait, you've got to have it. You've got to have it. It's compulsory.
It's Sony, right? They're going to give you everything.
Well, you could have the 24, but I think any new RX1R would be a premium product, and then throw everything at it.
Yeah.
So it'd have the 61 megapixel sensor, you'd have an AI processor, it'd have extra subject detection modes.
Yeah. Well, if they do that, I hope the price is not going to be $5,000. Otherwise, I'm going to go straight to Leica Q if they do that.
No, be 4,999. 95.
Psychologically different. It's not five yet. We're £1 shy of 5.
I mean, I don't think the Leica Q is miraculously good. It's a nice camera, though.
Yeah, the Q3 in particular, obviously, is now because it's got a hybrid AF system, so it's way better than before. So you can do some kind of like a CAFs if you really want to. I always like the Leica Q, but I just think they're a little bit overpriced, to be honest. And even though it has a Leica lens on it,
it's not the same experience as a Leica rangefinder. I mean, Leica rangefinders are difficult cameras to use, but this is a different experience with the Q.
That's exactly the point, because you pay Leica for obviously not only just the brand, but if you pay the extra money for that experience, and that experience comes from the M cameras.
Horrible experience.
and with the SL, we can talk about Leica in a separate video, of course. But the SL and the Q, they are just like any other digital cameras on the market. There's no differentiation to any things that I've seen.
I was somewhat disappointed by the SL3.
Right.
Because the interface, where what Leica's like, the physical design in the interface is just wonderful, but the images could have been from anything. There's no character to them in the same way that there is with the Leica M cameras.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with the Leica Q, as you say. The that the images don't have any special fairy dust to make them special, to make them different.
Yeah.
Lovely camera to use, but the images are like
Yeah, I mean, the experience counts a lot. Like a rangefinder certainly is a very different experience. So yeah, you if you can afford it or buy film cameras, it's a very different shooting experience. So if you haven't tried that, I do would you like to try. Like to urge you to try it. You don't have to hold on to it. Try it. If you don't like it, sell it on. As Leica stuff, most of the Leica stuff, you don't lose money. You just resell it the next day. You probably won't lose much money anyway.
It's quite a perverse thing to say, but I think in a way the difficulty of getting good results from a Leica M makes them seem more valuable.
Because you work for it.
Because yeah, I know it sounds like being deliberately contrarian, making things difficult for the sake of it, but I do think it's true that the more you have to work for an image, the more you're invested in it.
Yeah.
And the stronger you feel about it. So I did some shots with an M monochrome where I had a whole load that were duds because I hadn't got the focusing quite right quickly enough to get the shot. But the ones that did work, they just had that look, and they were instantly my favourites out of all the months of shooting I'd done before.
Yeah.
Partly because they have a look, and partly because the difficulty makes them more of an achievement and makes you feel you're more engaged with the image. It's like when you had to wait for your Kodachromes to come back from Germany. Took about a fortnight. The anticipation made them seem all the more exciting.
Absolutely. I think that's why it is special. But yes, we are going to talk about Leica, so don't worry about it if you want to hear more about Leica. And maybe we'll just wrap it up now with just one final comment before we say goodbye. Dennis said, I guess the new RX1R wouldn't be less than $4,000 since the A7CR. Yeah, we totally agree. We were just joking about, and but I think it will get into a very dangerous category level if you're pricing around. Let's say if they do release an RX1 successor, it'll be dangerously close to Leica territory. I think, and that's the point when branding will separate them. And if you suddenly have let's say $4,500 RX1 Mark III, whatever, and then Q is only a few hundred more, would you buy a Q or Sony?
Yeah.
I think most would just go with Leica because of the brand.
And Leica's as a brand has got more value than Zeiss, and I don't think Sony could use Zeiss anymore.
No.
They'd have to put something like a G-Star lens on the front or something like that.
And that is probably why they haven't made an RX1 successor. I think they know. I
guess.
Yeah,
they don't have that brand collateral.
Yeah, it just doesn't work pricing wise. I think if they know it just wouldn't work, and that's the trouble. I think in some way about pricing in general Sony cameras. There's this to wrap things up now. We've been saying all along now. The modern digital cameras are getting more expensive. Lenses are getting more expensive, especially good ones. All the G Master lenses are extremely expensive. Even though as a working professional myself, and I couldn't justify buying G Master lenses, I get actually the cheaper 1.8 primes just to use on my Nikon Z. I just don't see the value that I gain from my professional side. I don't see that the extra £2,000 would gain me extra £10,000 of reward. If I talk about selling images, I don't see that. Obviously I'm not an investor in that way. I know people would go for the ultimate quality. Don't get me wrong. Good lenses are good lenses. I do appreciate them. You have good, really excellent lenses. I do have a few of my own. But when you come to working pros, I don't think that these extra lenses, extra values that I have to invest in it would give me the same reward.
It depends on your job, doesn't it? You have to, if you're buying a camera to do a job, you have to weigh the cost against the return.
Yeah. And like I said, my cheapo £130 50-1.8 Sony E lens, even though it's really rubbish, but it still does the job well enough.
It's not quite rubbish. It's all right, I would think.
But recently I just reviewed the 7 Artisan 50-1.8. that is same price, but it's better than it.
Oh, awkward.
It's awkward, like it's a Chinese lens is better than a Sony lens, but it's bigger, heavier, and there's no doubt about it. But then again, as it shows that optically the 51.8 Sony E lens isn't the best, and but then again, like I said, £130, it's cheap, and it does the job. It does the job well enough, and then to make money, especially from my point of view, it's like £130. I mean, I can easily earn it back, for half the job that I do. So it's a no-brainer. But would I spend $2,500 to get a G Master 51.2? I don't know about that.
No,
I could.
If you were shooting high society weddings, for massive fees, and you needed a particular look to keep getting the clients, then you would.
Quite possibly. Then again, I probably wouldn't use that lens either, or that system. I probably just use my Leica.
You should turn up with a Leica or a Hasselblad. That's the way. That's the way to keep your fees up.
Exactly. Just turn up with even a Fujifilm GFX, like just a big medium format camera. People know about it, and then that's it. That's all you need. That's all you ever need.
That's all you need.
Yeah. And okay, so I guess that's today's conclusion. Thank you guys for tuning in for this Sony talk. And next week we're gonna talk about another brand. I think we've only got a few more brands to go through, and then that will be the end of the series. How many more brands we still got left? I think we can talk about Leica, Ricoh, Pentax.
But Ricoh and Pentax together probably.
Yeah, Ricoh, Pentax, and Hasselblad. And who else do make camera these days?
Hasselblad and Phase 1 together. That's an interesting thing.
Yep. Okay. I think so. Yeah, pretty much about 2-3 more talks, and we're gonna finish.
Or Hasselblad and GFX together, maybe.
Yeah. Or maybe just group all the medium formats together. Although we talked about Fujifilm already, but we didn't quite spend enough time about GFX system.
I'm not sure if Hasselblad is still doing the H6 system, or whether it's only the X1Ds now. I'm just going to have a quick look.
No, I think they do have it. And I saw a newsletter the other day. Anthony say, Minolta rangefinder style. Oh, you know what I want. I don't care who makes it. I would like to see a digital TLR. Can someone make a digital TLR? I would love to see a digital. Wonderful. I would love to see a digital TLR. That would be awesome.
Well, Sony's SLT cameras already had the system, didn't they? To the separate taking box.
Taking optics and switching in optics.
Yeah, and then it's a completely separate system with an EVF. All you need is a whopping great LCD display instead of the ground glass screen.
Yeah.
And you're there. That's what you need.
Yep.
Square format camera, please.
Yes, please. Angelo, you can see Angelo has been our faithful listener.
Yes,
Nick, he listed out what we haven't been talking so far. So Nikon, Hasselblad, Phase 1, Pentax, Ricoh. Well done. That's good. That's good. Yeah. I do like the Gigafish though. Kodak. Kodak still makes point and shoot, so they're still there.
It's not Kodak. It's not Kodak. It's some manufacturing company that's bought the trademark.
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah. There's no continuity with the old Kodak.
I wonder what's the underlying technology. Or what else do they make? The guys who make the Kodak cameras these days.
Something from a 10-year-old cybershop, probably.
Hopefully not the same company who makes the £65 Amazon cameras I just bought.
Yeah, you got to tell us about this sometime. Perhaps you can tell us about this next week.
Yeah, guys, listen. Yeah, I've got a great camera from Amazon for £65. Brilliant, 48 megapixel 4K video. I'm telling you, the spec will stun you.
Sure, it's not 4.8 megapixels.
Maybe artificial. Maybe they use AI to upscale it to 48. You never know. It's a very advanced camera. I'm telling you, that's a very, very cool thing.
It's using AI to generate what the image would have looked like if the camera had been any good.
Great. I could just point it to the sky and something would turn up.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Great stuff. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. And next week we're gonna maybe talk about Nikon. I think Nikon will be quite interesting to talk about as well. Let's talk about all the big three. So we talked about Canon this week, Sony. So next week another big three will be Nikon. So we're gonna spend some time talking about Nikon. So if you guys want to talk about Nikon or come in and talk about it, if you're a Nikon user, used Nikon before, please join us next week. We're going to spend some time talking about Nikon and share your experience with the camera system and let us know all the good and bad. Well, what would you like to see in the future as well, just like what we talked about today. In the meantime, if you guys want have any more things to add for after this live stream, please do so in the comment section below about Sony cameras and anything that you would like to see them developing. Anything you liked about them, anything you don't or hate about them, please do share your comments below, and hopefully someone from Sony will look at them, and then hopefully we'll get better products from them in the future. So that will be quite good. Yeah, well, they do embrace YouTube, right? You know, they may look at it. You never know.
Next time we're doing a show, Jimmy, we'll go to the Sony stand and we'll pitch all this stuff and see what happens.
Yep. Yeah, please sponsor this show. Give us all the cameras you ever that you would like to showcase.
Yeah, and make every camera we want. We'll come out next year to look at them.
Yep, absolutely. Right, thank you guys for joining in, and no doubt we will see you all next week. And thank you, Rod, for coming in. So until next time, I will see you all very, very soon. Bye for now.